Today he wants to be a grandfather and tries to dress for the role. Long eggshell-colored linen pants with cuffs instead of his dirty old plaid bell-bottom golf slacks. He looks at himself in the mirror and is stunned deep inside by the bulk of what he sees. Talk about Nelson. His own hair, his blondness dirtied and dulled by gray, is thinning back from his temples. Tall as he is, there is no carrying the slope under his shirt as anything other than a loose gut, a paunch that in itself must weigh as much as a starving Ethiopian child. "Today's the day," he announces at breakfast. "Grandpa's going to take you to amazing places." Judy and Roy look doubtful, but not entirely. Prue, tall from Harry's seated angle, her hips level with his eyes, hesitantly asks, "Would you two possibly enjoy having the grandchildren to yourselves for this expedition? Nelson couldn't get to sleep last night and kept me pretty much up, too. I just can't face a day in the car." She does look pale and drawn, the kid keeping her up all night with his whining and whatever else. Jana says, "Of course, dear. You get some sleep, and then maybe you and Nellie could do something healthy and fun." In the car by 9:30, provisioned with a triple-barreled package of double-stuffed Oreos and a six-pack of classic Coke, they begin the long day. They start by driving down Route 41 to Fort Myers and visiting the Thomas Alva Edison winter home, which nearly does them in. Then they eat at a McDonald's where, for some legal reason, fear of lawsuits, the unapologetic cashier thinks when they ask her about it, the door is locked out to the playground with its spiral slide and its enticing plastic man with a head shaped like a hamburger. Roy throws a fit at the locked door and all through lunch has these big liquid googies of grief to snuffle back up into his nose. French fries and about a pound of salt are all the kid eats. Back in the hot car, Harry sneaks a look at his watch. Just noon. He can't believe it. It feels like 4 in the afternoon. "Let's make a deal," Harry proposes. "We'll drive up and nip into Jungle Gardens, and if there's a guided tour or you think it'll depress you, we'll nip right out again, the hell with them. Otherwise, we'll go through and see the flamingos and then buy a Sarasota paper and see what's at the movies. Roy, you big enough to sit through a whole movie?" Judy says, "He cried so hard during Dumbo, Mommy had to take him out." Dumbo's Mommy," Roy begins to explain, then starts to cry. "Yeah," Harry says, turning onto 41 again, casting back his voice, rolling along. "That's a tough one, out there in that little prison car. But it all works out. Roy, you should have stayed to the end. If you don't stay to the end, the sadness sticks with you." "He becomes a star," Judy tells her brother spitefully. "He shoots peanuts at all the bad clowns. You missed all that." "That Disney," Harry says, half to Janice, half for their little audience. "He packed a punch. You had to have been raised in the Depression to take it. Even Nelson, your daddy, couldn't stand Snow White when it came around in rerun." "Daddy doesn't like anything," Judy confides. "Just his dumb friends." "What friends?" Rabbit asks her. "Oh, I don't know their names. Slim and like that. Mommy hates them and won't go out anymore. She says she's scared." "Scared? Scared of what?" "Harry," Janice mutters beside him. "Don't pump the children." "Scared of Slim," Roy says, trying it out for sound. Judy thumps him. "No, Daddy is not scared of Slim, you Dumbo. He's scared of those other men." "What other men?" Harry asks. "Harry," Janice says. "Forget I asked," he calls back. Jungle Gardens works out better than anyone dared hope. You can go one way to the reptile show and the Gardens of Christ, and the other to the bird show. They all turn toward the bird show and watch tattered, disgruntled-looking parrots ride bicycles and seesaws and hop through hoops. The 4 angstroms come to Mirror Lake, where mute swans float, and Flamingo Lagoon, where flocks of flamingos, colored that unreal orange-pink color, sleep while standing up like big feathery lollipops. After the flamingos, the path takes them to a snack bar in a pavilion, and a shell and butterfly exhibit, and a goldfish pond, and a cage of black leopards. Janice says, "Let's go see if the kids want anything in the souvenir shop, and then go buy a paper. I'm dying to be somewhere air-conditioned." In the souvenir shop, they buy Judy a lovely glossy top shell, and Roy a strikingly black-and-white murex, with rough prongs that he instantly begins to scrape along smooth surfaces, the painted rail leading back to the parking lot, and the Camry itself, if Harry hadn't reached down and grabbed the little slob by his boneless arm. The movie they all decide upon is Working Girl, at 2:45, at some park that turns out to be miles away. Though Judy swears Roy has been to the movies before, he doesn't seem to understand you can't just talk up, as in your own living room. He keeps asking why with a plaintive inflection. Why she take off her clothes? Why she's so mad at that man? As they head home from the movie, Janice announces, "I think I need a job. Wouldn't you like me better, Harry, if I was a working girl?" "Which state would you work in?" "Pennsylvania, obviously. Florida is for vacations." He doesn't like the idea. It has something fishy and uncomfortable about it, like that batch of November stats from Springer Motors. "What work would you do?" "I don't know. Sell something, maybe. My father was one and my son is one, so why shouldn't I be one? A salesperson." Rabbit doesn't know what to answer. After all these years of his grudgingly sticking with her, he can't quite imagine him begging her to stick with him, though this is his impulse. 40 miles of southwestern Florida rush-hour traffic bring them to the De Leon exit and Pindlepalm Boulevard and the nicely guarded entrance of Valhalla Village. Up in 413, Prue and Nelson look bathed and refreshed and act as if nothing has ever happened. Rabbit sits in the chair across the glass table from the sofa and delicately needles his son. "Did you catch up finally on your sleep?" he asks. Nelson gets the dig and looks over at him with his dark, swarmy eyes a little flat across the top, like a cross cat's. "I went into a place to get a bite to eat last night and stayed at the bar too long," he tells his father. "You do that often?" "Nah," he allows. "Just when I'm tense, it helps to take off once in a while. Prue understands. Nothing happens." Rabbit holds up a generous hand. "None of my business, right? You're 21 plus. It's just you could have called." "I tried to call, Dad, but I don't have your number down here memorized, and the place I was in, some sleazeball had stolen the phone book." The local news commentator is giving the manatee update on television. Throughout the weekend, encounters with manatees remain likely in widely varied habitats around southwest Florida. "They say that," Rabbit says, "but I never encounter one." "That's because you're never on the water," Nelson says. "Tomorrow," Rabbit loudly promises he doesn't know who. "I'll get out. Judy and I will rent a sunfish." "I don't know," Nelson says. "How safe are those things?" Rabbit is insulted. "They're like toys, for Christ's sake. If they tip over, you just stand on the centerboard and up they come. Why don't you all come along?" "Maybe we will, if I can," Nelson says. "I'm expecting a call or two." "From the lot? Can't they even manage for half a week?" Nelson is drifting away, hiding behind the distraction of television. "No," he is saying, so softly Rabbit can hardly hear. "It's a contact I made down here." The next morning, Harry, Prue, and the children find Greg Silvers, the son of one of Harry's golf partners, in a glassed-in, straw-matted area past the lobby on the way to the Omni Bayview Hotel swimming pool. A curly-haired man, brown as an Arab from being off and on the beach all day. Greg is in charge of the sunfish. "My father said you'd be coming," he says. "This is Mrs. Angstrom?" He means Prue, who has come instead of Janice, who, after all that tramping around yesterday, wanted to stay home and catch up on her errands and go to her aerobics class and bridge group and spend a little time with Nelson before he goes home. "Thanks for the compliment, Greg," Harry says, pretty smoothly considering. "But this is my daughter-in-law, Teresa, and these are my 2 grandchildren, Judy and Roy." Moving and speaking in a relaxed, thorough way that suggests his whole day could happily be devoted to them, Greg leads them back onto the terrazzo corridors and arranges for locker keys for them with a boy at the desk, and then leads them to the locker room doors and tells them how to exit directly onto the beach, where he will meet them and manage the sunfish rentals. "How much do I owe you for all this?" Harry asks. "I think about 120 for the 4 of you would cover it." Prue speaks up. "We don't want to. I'd be terrified." 90 should about do it, then, Greg says. When Rabbit and Roy are alone in the locker room, he tells the child, "Jesus, Roy, that just about cleaned out poor old Grandpa's wallet." Roy looks up at him with frightened, inky eyes. "Will they put us in jail?" he asks, his voice high and precise, like wind chimes. Harry laughs. "Where'd you get that idea?" "Daddy hates jail." "Well, who doesn't?" Harry says, wondering if the kid is quite right in the head. Out on the beach, Greg is waiting for all of them at a blue and yellow hut of corrugated fiberglass. He has taken from the hut a rudder, a centerboard, and 2 life jackets of black foam rubber. "You've done this before?" he asks Harry. "Sure. How long do I have it for?" 1 hour. No sweat if you don't bring it back in on the dot. There's not much action today. A lot of people don't like taking them out in this much wind. Take number 19 on the end there. The boats are up on the dry sand in a line, along with some other big water toys. Harry pulls at the nylon painter attached to the bow, and the hull is heavier than he thought. By the time he's dragged it 40 feet through the sand, his breathing feels shallow, and that annoying binding pain has begun to flicker on the left side of his ribs. "Put your life jacket on," he tells his granddaughter. "It makes me feel fat," she argues. "I don't need it. I can swim for miles, honest." "Put it on, honey," he repeats serenely, pleased that blood of his has learned ease in an element that has always frightened him. He puts his own jacket on and feels armored and female, as the kid says, fat. "You keep an eye on us," he tells Prue. She helps pull the hull to the water's agitated, slip-slopping edge. She quiets the flapping sail, which wants to swing the boom, while he sorts out the lines and clips in the rudder. He lifts Judy up and on. Little Roy, when he sees his sister about to go somewhere without him, screams and stalks into a wave that knocks him down. Prue picks him up and holds him on her hip. Harry wades in up to his waist to walk the boat out, then heaves himself aboard, barking his shin on a cleat, and grabs at the line attached to the aluminum boom. He steadies the rudder and pulls the sail taut. The boat is dipping and patting the waves one by one as the offshore breeze moves the boat away from the solidity of land. Judy is stationed on this side of the mast, poised to pull the centerboard down its slot. Harry sits awkwardly on the wet fiberglass with his legs bent and one hand behind him on the tiller and the other clutching the sheet. Rabbit looks back toward land. Prue, the sun behind her, is a forked silhouette against the blaze of the beach. Her figure in another minute will be impossible to distinguish from all the others tangled along the sand, the overprinted alphabet of silhouettes. "Now, Judy," he says, "we can't keep going forever in this direction, or we'll wind up in Mexico. What I'm going to do is called coming about. I say, coming about, hard alee, and you duck your head and don't slide off when the boat changes direction. Ready? Coming about, hard alee." He is not quite decisive enough in pushing the tiller away from him, and for too many seconds, with Judy crouched in a little acrobatic ball, though the boom has already passed over her head, they head lamely into the wind. But then an inertia not quite squandered by his timidity swings the bow past the line of the wind, and the sail stops impatiently rippling and bellies with a sulky ripple in the direction of the horizon and goes tight. and Judy stops looking worried and laughs as she feels the boat tug forward again over the choppy, opaque waves. He pulls in sail, and they move at right angles to the wind, parallel to the color-flecked shore. Harry begins to know where the wind is coming from without squinting up at the faded telltale at the top of the mast, and to feel instinctively the planes of force his hands control. Growing more confident, he comes about again and heads toward a distant green island tipped with a pink house and pulls in the sail and does not flinch when the boat heels on this new tack. Like a good grandfather, he explains his actions to Judy as they go along, the theory and the practice, and both of them become infected by confidence, by the ease with which this toy supporting them can be made to trace an angled path back and forth, teasing the wind and the water by stealing a fraction of their glinting great magnitudes. The patter of waves on the hull has settled into his ears as a kind of deafness. "You kind of lose track of time out here," Harry says. "But from the way the sun is, it must be near noon. We should head back in. That's going to take some time since the wind's coming out against us. We don't want your mother to get worried." Time slips by. The waves idly slap, but the shore doesn't seem to be drawing closer. "Let's come about," he says, and this time he tries to trim the wind too closely. A puff comes from an unexpected direction, and instead of the sunfish settling at a fixed heel in a straight line at a narrow angle to the direction they have been moving in, it heels and won't stop heeling. It loses its grip on the water, on the blue air. The mast passes a certain point up under the sun, and as unstoppably as if pushed by a giant malevolent hand, topples sideways into the gulf. Rabbit feels his big body together with Judy's little lithe one, pitch downward, feet first, into the abyss of water, his fist still gripping the line in a panic. "Judy?" he calls. His voice not his out here between horizons, nothing solid under him, and waves slapping his face with a teasing malice. "Judy!" Now his voice belongs entirely to the hollow air, to the heights of terror. He shouts so loud he swallows water, his immersed body offering no platform for him to shout from. He coughs, and his eyes take on tears. She is not here. There are only the dirty green waves, and the hollow mute hull of the sunfish hulking beside him. She must be under the sail. It seems vast in the water, a long nylon pall with its diagonal seams. He forces himself down into a kind of dirty green clay where his bubbles are jewels. Against the slither of cloth on his back, he tries to funnel forward. In this tunnel, he encounters a snake, a flexible, limp limb that his touch panics, so it tries to strangle him and drag him down deeper. It claws his ear. His head rises into the sail, and a strained white light breaks upon his eyes, and there is a secret damp nylon odor, but no air to breathe. His body convulsively tries to free itself from this grave. He flounders with his eyes shut. The sail's edge eventually nuzzles past his drowning face, and he has dragged Judy into the light. Her coppery wet hair gleams an inch from his eyes. Her face makes a blurred, clotted impression upon him, but she is writhingly alive. Joy that she lives crowds his heart, a gladness that tightens and rhythmically hurts, like a hand squeezing a ball for exercise. Judy keeps hanging around his neck and coughing up water and fright. The rough motion of her little body wrenches twinges out of his tender, stunned chest, where something living flutters and aches. Perhaps a minute has passed since their spill. After another minute, Judy has breath enough to attempt a smile. Though his pains continue underwater, he can speak. "The wind changed on us," he explains to Judy. "These things tip over too damn easy." Judy's voice has a quaver. "How do we get it back up?" Easy, he tells her. Stay close to me, but don't hang on me anymore, honey. Your life vest will hold you up. Gently he lets go of the mast and with careful paddling motions takes the 2 nylon lines floating loose and tosses them over to the other side. Okay, now we're going to doggy paddle around the boat. They make their way past the tiller. As long as he is in the water, at least he doesn't weigh much. But when, taking hold of the line threaded through the top of the aluminum mast, he struggles to place his weight on the centerboard, at first with his arms and then with his feet, he feels crushed by his old load of slack muscle and fat and guts. The pain in his chest gathers to such a red internal blaze that he squeezes his eyes shut to blot it out, and blindly then feels, with a suck of release, the sail lift free of the water and the centerboard under him plunge toward vertical. The boat knocks him backwards as it comes upright, and the loose, wet sail swings its boom back and forth in a whipping tangle of line. You did it! Grandpa, you okay? I'm great. Can you get on first, honey? I'll hold the boat steady for you. After several failed leaps out of the water, Judy plops her belly on the curving deck. Now, Harry announces, here comes the whale. And, lifting his mind clear of the striated, pulsing, squeezing within his rib cage, rises up enough out of the water to seize the tipping hull with his abdomen. The hungry water still sucks at his legs and feet, but he kicks it away and shakily arranges himself in his position at the tiller again. He tells Judy, "We're getting there, young lady." "You okay, Grandpa? You're talking kind of funny." "Can't breathe too well, for some reason." He speaks rapidly, between twinges. "What we're going to do is, as quietly as we can, take 2 big tacks and get to shore. It may not be exactly where your mother is, but we want to get to land. I feel very tired and strange, and if I fall asleep, you wake me up." "Wake you up? Don't look so worried. In fact, I have a fun job for you." "What's that?" Judy asks. "Sing to me." "Sing? I don't know any songs, Grandpa." "Everybody knows some songs. How about Row, Row, Row Your Boat to start off with?" He closes his eyes intermittently, in obedience to the animal instinct to crawl into a cave with your pain, and her little voice amid the slip-slop of the waves and resistant creaking of the mast picks its wavery way through the words of the round which he used to sing in the 2nd grade. He has to tack twice more, and by then Judy has discovered within herself the treasure of songs from videos she has watched many times, of children's classics Rabbit saw when they were new, the first time in those old movie theaters with Arabian decors and plush curtains. "Nice, Judy," Rabbit grunts. "Terrific." "It was fun, like you said. Look, there's Mommy." Rabbit lets the sheet and tiller go. The sunfish bobs in the breaking waves of shallow water, and Judy pulls up the centerboard and jumps off into water up to her shiny hips and pulls the boat like a barge through the last yards before the bow scrapes sand. "We tipped over and Grandpa got sick," she shouts. Not just Prue and Roy, but Greg Silvers have come to meet them, about a good 6-iron shot up the beach from where they set out. Greg's too-tanned face gives a twitch, seeing the way Harry keeps stretched out beside the useless tiller, and seeing something Harry can't, perhaps the color of his face. How bad is he? Greg asks Harry, "Want to stay where you are?" Harry waits until a push of pain passes and says, "I'm getting off this fucking tub if it kills me." But the action of standing and easing off the tipping sunfish and wading a few feet does bad things to his slipped insides. He lies down on the sand at Prue's feet. "Judy, got under the sail," he hears his voice say. "Scared me." A complicated, warmish thing, with fingers, is touching his wrist, feeling his pulse. First aid training must be part of Greg's job. To assist him in his diagnosis, Harry volunteers, "Sorry to be such a crump. I had this terrific desire to lie down." "You keep lying there, Mr. Angstrom," Greg says, sounding suddenly loud and crisp. "We're going to get you to the hospital." The Delian Community General Hospital is a modern set of low white buildings added onto a bisque-colored core dating from the 30s. Janice spent most of yesterday here, so she knows the way into the parking garage and which arrows painted on the floor to follow out. Janice leads, and Nelson, Roy, Prue, and Judy, all in their airplane clothes, follow, hurrying to keep up. In just one day, Janice has acquired a widow's briskness, the speed of foot of a woman with no man to set the pace for her. Also some remnant of old love pulls her toward her man, now that his animal fragility has resharpened her awareness of his body. The children are frightened. Roy and Judy don't know what they will see in this visit. Perhaps their grandfather has been monstrously transformed, as by a wicked witch in a fairy story, into a toad or a steaming puddle. A skinny, strict woman at the main desk consults a computer printout and gives them a floor number and directs them to the correct elevator. Their floor is the 4th, the topmost. Janice is struck by how much less elaborate the nurse's station is here than in the intensive cardiac care unit. Here, on floor 4, there is just a single high counter and a few desks and a waiting area with a hard walnut settee and a coffee table holding magazines. Prue takes Roy from Nelson's arms and tells her husband, "Why don't you take Judy in?" Nelson's face undergoes a displeased, alarmed stretching. "I don't want to be the first. Suppose he's delirious or something. Mom, you ought to go in first." "For heaven's sake," Janice says. "I talked to him 2 hours ago over the phone and he was perfectly normal." But she takes Judy by the hand and they go down the shiny, rippled corridor. To Harry, as he lies on his back drugged and tied down by tubes and wires in what seems a horizonless field of white, the sight of little Judy alive and perfect in each red hair and freckle is a pure joy. He has trouble at first realizing he must perform for his visitors, that it's not enough to lie here and accept the apparition of them like another channel of television. He lowers his eyes to Judy's eager face, bright and precise as watchworks free of dust and rust, and says to her, "We learned, didn't we, Judy? We learned how to come about." "It's like a scissors," the girl says, showing with her hands. "You push toward the sail." "Right," he says. Or is it away from? His thinking is foggy. His voice, nasal and husky, doesn't sound like his. Janice sits in a chair near his bed, a new kind of vinyl-cushioned wheelchair. "Harry, what do the doctors say about you? What's going to happen?" she asks. He tells her, "One doc told me I have an athlete's heart. Too big on the outside, that is, and too small on the inside." Judy's face is transfixed by the screen of the heart monitor, which he can't see. Janice watches it too, their 4 eyes shiningly reflecting the electronic jiggle and their 2 mouths both open to make identical slots of darkness. He goes on, "They want to put some dye into my heart by putting a long tube into some artery down at the top of my leg so they can see exactly what's going on. But offhand, they think at least one of the coronary arteries is plugged. No problem, though. They can bypass anything. They do it every day now, as simple as plumbing with plastic pipe." "You're going to have open heart surgery?" Janice asks in alarm. "Nothing for now," he says. "Maybe eventually. It's an option. Another option is this catheter has a balloon in it somehow that they inflate when it's inside the plugged-up artery. It cracks the plaque. That's what they call it, plaque. I thought a plaque was what you got for winning the championship. Rabbit has to keep suppressing the impulse to laugh at his inability to share with Janice the drug-induced peace inside his rib cage, the sense of being at last at the still center. After a while, Prue appears, hesitantly filling the doorway. "Janice, I'm sorry," she says, still shy of using her mother-in-law's name. "I know he shouldn't have so many visitors at once, but Nelson is getting frantic. He's afraid we're going to miss the plane." Janice stands, so briskly the wheelchair recoils under her. She staggers, but keeps her feet. "I'll leave. You say hello and bring Judy when you come. Harry, I'll drop by on my way back when I've put them on the plane." His tall daughter-in-law fiddles with her long red hands, yet moves forward to the foot of the bed. "Harry," she says, "listen, we're stricken at what's happened to you." "You and who else?" he asks, determined to be debonair. "Nelson, obviously. I don't think he slept a wink last night. You were so much on his mind. He can't say it, but he loves you." Harry laughs gently, since there is this Valentine inside him that might rip. "The kid and I have something going between us. Not sure love is what you'd call it." Since she hesitates in replying, he goes on, "I love him all right, but maybe it's a him that's long gone. A little tiny kid, looking right up to you while you're letting him down. You never forget it." "It's still there under it all," Prue assures him, without saying what it all is. He feels there is a lot she wants to say, but doesn't dare. "Tell me about you, Prue," Rabbit says, the words gliding out of his hoarse mouth. "How's it going for you with the kid, with Nelson?" People do respond, surprisingly, to the direct approach. She says without hesitation, "He's a wonderful father to the children. That I can say sincerely. Protective and concerned and involved, when he can focus." "Why can't he always focus?" Prue blurts out, "The lot worries him, I think. Sales have been off these last years with the weaker dollar and all. He has trouble being patient. And to tell the truth, I think it scares him to have none of the old-timers around anymore. He feels alone, and all he has for company are these flaky types from North Brewer." She's trying to tell Harry something. Something is slipping. But how can a man tied up helpless in bed track it down? Rabbit has his heart to nurse. This is life and death. His drugs must be wearing off. Prue shrugs her wide shoulders in answer to his question about how it was going. "What's a life supposed to be? They don't give you another for comparison. I love the big house in Pennsylvania. In Akron we only ever had apartments, and the rent was always behind." Rabbit tries to lift himself onto her level, out of his private apprehension of darkness. "You're right," he says. "We ought to be grateful. But it's hard, being grateful. It seems like from the start you're put here in a kind of fix, hungry and scared, and the only way out is no good either. Hey, listen to me. You're still young. You're great-looking. Smile. Smile for me, Teresa." Prue smiles and comes around the end of the bed and bends down to give him a kiss, not on the mouth this time like in the airport, but on the cheek. "It seems terrible, us leaving like this, but there's this party in Brewer Nelson's determined to go to tonight, and changing reservations is impossible anyway. Everything's jammed this time of year, even into Newark." "What can you do?" he asks her. "I'll be fine. This is probably a blessing in disguise. Put some sense into my old head, get me to lose some weight, go for walks, eat less crap. The doc says I must become a new man." Prue, standing tall again, says in a level, low voice he has not exactly heard before, "Don't change too much, Harry." She adds, "I'll send Nelson in." Nelson comes in carrying little Roy in his arms, though visitors under 6 years old aren't supposed to be allowed. When Harry tries to beam him a smile and a wink, Roy, with a snap of his head, hides his face in his father's neck. Nelson, too, seems shocked. His eyes keep going up to the monitor, with its orange twitch of on-running life. "How are you doing?" The kid's face goes a little white around the gills, as if he fears his father will really tell him. "Pretty good, considering." "Great. This big beefy doctor with a funny accent came out and talked to us, and said that the first one is the one a lot of people don't survive. And in your case now, for a while at least, it's just a matter of changing your lifestyle a little. That guy has a thing about potato chips and hot dogs. If God didn't want us to eat salt and fat, why did he make them taste so good?" Nelson's eyes get dark and swarmy, the way they do whenever his father mentions God. The conversation keeps sticking. It doesn't flow. Harry keeps thinking how he is falling. The kid is like a weight on his chest. "Come on," he says to himself. "Try. You only live once. Prue told me you were up all night with worry." "Yeah, well, she exaggerates, but sort of. I don't know why I can't sleep down here. It all feels phony to me, and there's all this stuff back in Brewer I should be tending to." "Like at the lot?" Rabbit asks. "Well, yeah, and other stuff. I keep feeling hassled." "That's life, Nelson. Hassle." "Oh, yeah, the stat sheets. I've been thinking about that. Are you having trouble moving the used? Don't get greedy. 10% markup is all you should expect. It's worth shaving the profit just to keep inventory flowing." "Okay, Dad, if you say so. I'll check it out," Nelson says. The conversation sticks again. Roy squirms in his father's grip. "I'm really getting anxious about you making your plane," Harry says. "Sorry about that, by the way. I feel crummy leaving. Prue and I were talking last night if we ought to stay a few more days, but I don't know. You make plans, you get socked in." "Don't I know it? What could you do, staying? Your old man's fine. He's in great hands." Nelson has become quite tense. He radiates a nervous desire to be elsewhere. "Okay, Dad, you're right. We'd better get moving." Full though his arms are, he manages to lean in past the tangle of life-supporting connections and give Harry's cheek a quick kiss. A warm touch of mustache. A sea urchin's sting. Sun and moon rise and fall. The well-worn wheels of nature that in Florida impinge where beach meets sea are in Pennsylvania muffled, softened, sedimented over, clothed in the profoundly accustomed. His first days back, Rabbit likes to drive around, freshening his memory and hurting himself with the pieces of his old self that cling to almost every corner of the Brewer area. The streets where he was a kid are still there, though the trolley cars no longer run. In Brewer, people still use the streets. They sit out on their steps and little porches in an expectant way you never see in Delian. In the slate-gray two-door Celica he and Janice lock into their garage when they take the Camry wagon south in the fall, he feels safe gliding along and attracts not too many stares. A block or two toward the mountain, he is suddenly driving in a white tunnel, trees on both sides of the street in white blossoms, the trees young and oval in shape, and blending one into the other like clouds. Along the sidewalk in this radiant long grove, shadowy people push baby carriages and stand chatting by their steps as if oblivious of the wonder suspended above them, enclosing them, already shedding a confetti of petals. They are in heaven. He wants to ask one of them the name of these trees and how they came to be planted here in these hard brick blocks of Brewer, but feels shy in their gaze toward him, himself a shadow in this filtered tunnel light of blossoms, and figures they would not know anyway. But Janice knows. When he describes this experience to her, she says, "Those are those Bradford pear trees the city is planting. Everywhere the old elms and buttonwoods are dying off." "Why have I never seen them before?" he asks. "You have, Harry, I'm sure. You've seen. It's just you see differently now." Since his heart attack, she means. Since nearly dying. He faintly feels with Janice now like one of the dead they used to say came back and watched over the survivors, living with them invisibly like mice in the walls. She often doesn't seem to hear him, or take him quite seriously. She goes off across Brewer to visit Nelson and Prue and their children in Mount Judge, or to remake acquaintance with her female buddies over at the Flying Eagle Country Club. And, at 53, she is looking for a job. He thought she had been kidding after seeing Working Girl, but no, the women her age almost all do something now. Janice thinks she might go into real estate. Later that week, over at the lot, Nelson isn't in, to Harry's considerable relief. The two salesmen on the floor are both young men he doesn't know, and who don't know him. Mr. Angstrom left for lunch around 1 o'clock, and said he might not be back this afternoon, a pudgy salesman tells him. Yeah, well, Harry tells this fat stranger, I'm a Mr. Angstrom, too. Who is here? Who knows anything? Another young salesman, a thinner one, comes toward them, and Harry sees it's not a man. Her hair being pulled back tight from her ears, and her wearing a tan trench coat to go out onto the lot to a customer, fooled him. It's a female car salesman. He tries to control his face, so his chauvinism doesn't show. I'm Elvira Allenbach, Mr. Angstrom, she says, and gives him a narrow, hard hand. She is a thin, taut young woman, overexercised, the way so many of them are now. I guess you've come onto the job since I was last here, Harry says. Just since January, she says. How do you like it, selling cars? You don't think of it usually as a woman's game. I know. Isn't that strange when it's really a natural? I like it very much, Elvira Allenbach says. It's been a good spring so far. The pudgy salesman, the one who's a man, feels obliged to put his 2 cents in. Nelson's really been making the used cars jump. Ads in the Standard, prices and shaving cream on the windshield knocked lower every 2 or 3 days, discounts for cash. Some people swing by every day to see what's up for grabs. Discounts for cash, huh? Harry says. Tell me, who else is here besides you two? Lyle's here, Elvira says. He says he's in remission. Glad to hear it, Harry says. I didn't think there was any remission. Where is he? He was in Nelson's office 10 minutes ago. Harry walks across the display floor to the green doorway. Lyle stands up at Nelson's desk before Harry is in the room. He is very thin. AIDS does that to you. Lyle suddenly, limply sits down, as if standing has been too much effort. Harry takes the chair across the desk. Lyle, Harry begins, I'd like to inspect the books. Bank statements, receipts, payments, loans, inventory, the works. Why on earth, why? Lyle's eyes, as the rest of his face melts away, stand out, more in the round than healthy people's eyes. Oh, human curiosity. Frankly, there's something fishy about the statements I've been getting in Florida. There aren't enough used car sales, proportionally. Lyle makes an effort and shifts his arm off the desk and rests with both hands out of sight on his lap. I can only show the books to authorized persons, he says. I'm authorized. Who could be more authorized than me? I used to run the place. My understanding from Nelson is that his mother owns the company. Yeah, but I'm her husband. Half of what's hers is mine, Harry says. In some circumstances, perhaps, and perhaps in some states, but not, I think, in Pennsylvania. If you wish to consult a lawyer, I don't need to consult any lawyer. All I need is to have my wife call you and tell you to show me the books. Me and our old bookkeeper, Mildred Croust. I want her in on this. Miss Croust, I believe, resides now in a nursing home, the Dengler home in Penn Park. Good. That's 5 minutes from my house. I'll pick her up and come back here tomorrow. Lyle's lids lower, and he awkwardly replaces his arm on the desktop. When and if I receive your wife's authorization. You'll get it. A smiling, provocative hovering in Lyle's expression goads him to ask, Do you doubt it? I'll be waiting to hear, Lyle says as Harry rises to leave.